Donald, congratulations.
Thank you.
And looking forward to having like we said, smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
Good.
welcome
Thank
back.
you. And thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. And a transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome.
Well, warm and welcoming. That was President Biden welcoming President-elect Donald Trump back to the White House yesterday. Both were all smiles while discussing a peaceful transfer of power. Joining me now is Republican National Committee co-chair Lara Trump. Lara, great to see you. Congratulations to you and the Republicans.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, we are very, very proud of all the work that we did and everything, obviously, that the American people delivered for President Trump and Republicans down ballot. We now have the Senate and the House as well. So it was a huge win, and we're really proud of our entire team.
Yeah, and certainly partly due to your efforts to ensure a clean election. Everybody thanks you for that. Trump won the popular vote and the Electoral College by a wide margin, even sweeping all the swing states. But Arizona and Nevada were slow to finish the counts. And I want to get your take on that, given you've done so much work on election integrity. Will anything be done to address this come January? How are you going to further clean things up?
Yeah, look, every state, as you probably know and as the viewers know, have their own election laws, and that's how they conduct the elections. And every state is different, including Arizona and Nevada. You have the opportunity in some states to start counting mail ballots, for example, when they come in. There are some states that wait until Election Day to start doing that. You had, I think, a 2-page ballot in a state like Arizona this go-round, which obviously slowed things down. You had the ability 5 days after Election Day to cure any signature requirements, meaning if there was a question, people had 5 days to come in and clear that up. So look, it's a state-by-state system, and I think what we've seen over the course of the past several election cycles is that the American people have been incredibly concerned with election integrity. It's why we made such a huge push from the RNC this election in particular to give our voters the confidence, and every American the confidence, that when you cast a ballot in the United States, your vote will count. There will be no funny business. Man, did we work hard, and did we have a huge team underway of 230,000 poll watchers and workers, 3,500 attorneys scattered around the battleground states. But it does beg the question, should there be more done to kind of streamline the process? And instead of it being state by state, maybe for federal elections, we should have a blanket law across the country. We want things, Maria, like voter ID, which if you go to California and try to take out an ID in an election, they say, please put it away. We don't even want it. Those kind of things, I think the American people say, why wouldn't you want to know who I am and that I am who I say I am, a legal citizen, for example? So there is a bigger question here and a bigger discussion, I think, to be had once we get Donald Trump inaugurated, once, of course, we have our majority in the Senate and the House back in, in office. I think it could be discussed. Should we have some sort of federal election guidance that makes the American people feel better about their vote?
Yeah, this is really important. And even going into the election, I was stunned to see the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, vow to stop voter ID. Why? I mean, if you're vowing to stop voter ID, it tells me that you want illegals, you want non-citizens to vote. Why would you make such a big deal of voter ID and vow to stop it?
Yeah, and why would you leave a border wide open, Maria? Why would you allow nearly 20 million people to pour in here undocumented? We have no idea who they are and where they've gone. They've been shipped all over the country. And so it really is a big question for the American people. And I think, look, it's foundational to our country to trust our electoral process. We hope at the RNC in 2024, one of the things that we were able to provide was that confidence in our elections. And going forward, I think we should never have a question about election integrity. We're certainly going to keep pushing from the RNC.
Yeah, look, you were a game changer in terms of cleaning things up. You and Michael Whatley with the lawsuits and ensuring that we did see a fair election. So thank you for that. President-elect Trump is moving fast to quickly fill out his cabinet. His latest picks include Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, Florida Senator Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. Senator Rubio reacting to reporters yesterday after accepting the nomination. Watch.
It's a tremendous honor to the president, who places confidence in me in a position of such importance. it's also a tremendous responsibility. And the job of the Secretary of State is to execute on the foreign policy set by the elected President of the United States. And I hope to have the opportunity to do it if my current colleagues here in the U.S. Senate confirm me.
Lara, we are expecting Marco Rubio to be confirmed. And of course, now we are watching to see what Ron DeSantis does. The governor of Florida will choose to put the next senator in that space. Will we be soon calling you Senator Trump?
Well, Maria, listen, I was so humbled and honored to even be considered for this. I know my name has been thrown out there a lot. And I would say that my experience at the RNC has really shown me, serving the American people. And if I were tapped for this, serving my home state now of Florida, it's a great honor and a great responsibility, obviously. But I would love to be able to go forward and do more. If this is something I'm asked to do, I would seriously consider it. But I have yet to hear from Governor DeSantis. So we'll see what happens.
Well, when you look at the state, of course, Florida, your home, what would be a priority for you to fight for should you get the chance to become a senator from the state of Florida?
Well, look, I don't think you'll find a person who is more in line with Donald Trump's America First values and policies than me. I've been part of this for 9 years, Maria, as has everyone, obviously, in our family. And I think the state of Florida resoundingly respects that America First policy. You saw the huge win here in Florida for Donald Trump 3 times now for president of the United States. And I think the American people and, look, people here in Florida want their lives back. They want a secure country. They want to see how we're going to clean things up. DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, I think that's a huge win for the people of this country. I think we're spending something like $2 trillion more per year right now than we were before COVID. And that's just going to continue on unless somebody does something about it. The American people don't want their money wasted. They want it to go to policies and platforms that actually impact their lives and make their lives better. They want, a strong military. They want peace through strength. Those are all things that are part of the America First agenda that should I have this great opportunity, I certainly will be fighting for every one of those things. That's
wonderful. We will wait to hear what Governor DeSantis says on this placement to put you in the Senate. Your thoughts on Trump's cabinet so far? Lara, a lot has been discussed about some of his non-traditional picks. I'm talking about Matt Gaetz as AG or Pete Hegseth as Defense Secretary. Your reaction?
Well, listen, I think Donald Trump learned a big lesson, probably the hard way whenever he first went in his first term in office. He was never in politics. Of course, everyone knows that. And he was sort of guided by the folks in Washington, D.C. as to who he should choose in his first term in office for his cabinet and his administration. And I think he'll be the first to say that is one of the mistakes I made. Could I go back and change that? I really would. He knows now who he needs by his side. He knows what he has to have to be successful for the American people and execute the mandate that they delivered with 312 electoral votes, the popular vote on November 5th. And he needs good people by his side to do that. So Donald Trump is not a traditional politician. And as you see, he doesn't pick a traditional group of people to surround him, but I think he picks great people. He has this amazing ability, Maria, and I've said this for a long time, to see things in people that maybe they don't even see within themselves. If you go to Donald Trump's company, what you'll see is that the top executives in his company oftentimes started out as drivers, as security guards, as doormen. These are people who he tapped and saw something within them and raised them up through the ranks. And now they're the top executives at the Trump organization. Likewise, I think with a lot of these picks, maybe they wouldn't be what a traditional president would choose. But the American people didn't want a traditional president. They wanted Donald Trump, and they wanted his policies executed and their country back. And I think all of these people are going to be able to deliver for the American people.
Yeah, and, he's got to be careful not to put people in key spots where they will turn around and undermine him. So what you said is exactly right, and I can understand his thinking on that. He wants to make major changes in his first 100 days back in office, including key issues like the economy, immigration, and energy. Tell us about his priorities on day one and what you're expecting to come after January 20th.
Yeah, listen, I think first and foremost, we've got to close down the southern border. That has been such a problem for this country by way of fentanyl, the number of people pouring into our country, how it's taxing every system in our country. Every state now is a border state. And you've already seen there's been movement since Donald Trump's election to kind of sway people away from coming to the southern border. There was that huge caravan, don't forget, that was coming up. And a lot of those people broke off. They said, oh, Donald Trump is president-elect. I know this is a bad time to go to the United States. He wants to close the border, and he wants to get out the bad people, the 13,000 murderers, the 15,000 sexual assaulters, the 350 people on the terror watch list, Maria. We've got to start there. And then he wants to drill, baby, drill. He wants America not just energy independent, energy dominant. That naturally is going to help with inflation. That is naturally going to be a great way to strengthen our country. I think the first couple of days in office, you're going to see two big movements, at least on those two things. And then I think the 94 executive orders that the Biden-Harris administration discarded, he's probably going to reinstate pretty quickly.
Lara, real quick, when you look at the pushback from some of these blue state governors, I mean, clearly they're not reading the will of the people, given that the Republicans have had a clean sweep here. But you've still got people like Pritzker, Hochul, and a couple of others vowing to stop Donald Trump from deporting anybody or executing his policies. Your reaction?
Yeah, well, what they're vowing to do is to continue to hurt the citizens of their states and their cities, because that's what's happening with these illegal immigrants here in the United States. I think it's really asinine, quite frankly, that a lot of these people are coming out with these sweeping statements. Look at the margins that Donald Trump nearly came to winning some of these states, like New Jersey. You saw that he cut in half, you know, the win that Democrats traditionally have in states like California and New York. They ought to listen to the people of their states and their cities. They want their lives back. They don't want people in their communities that are harming their bottom line and the citizens of their communities. So they sent a mandate on November 5th. I think these folks might want to pay a little bit more attention.
Yeah, I don't think the whole resist thing is going to work this time around. Lara, we'll keep checking back with you. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you.
All right, Lara Trump joining us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.